On September 1st, Russia was a couple steps away from enacting their final plan in the Donbass. They controlled the key cities of Izium, Liman, and were currently assaulting into Bakhmut. They were gathering troops inside of Izium for a big assault into Barvinkove. They were going to push into here so they could try to get behind Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. They were also building up forces in Liman to do a river crossing across the Seversky Donets River. Establishing a bridgehead here would cut supply to Siversk from Sloviansk, and considering that Russia had partial fire control over the only other road up through Bakhmut, this group would be effectively encircled and would have to retreat. In the chaos of the retreat and the operation going on, Russia was going to force a breakthrough through Bakhmut from multiple sides, and work their way up to the major cities in the Donetsk Oblast. They would have broken through the defense network of this region with a well-crafted plan. However, the main thing that prevented this from happening was the Kharkiv counterattack. The sheer scale of the attack and the inefficacy of the Russian defense was really amazing. Ukraine liberated a really massive region and it forced Russia to have to rethink its strategic aims. However, despite everything going on, Russia still had a chance to salvage the situation. Although it would have taken longer, they still would have possibly been able to have an easier victory in the Donetsk Oblast. However, 2 key battles and 1 full operation stopped this from happening. And that is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. After the Kharkiv counteroffensive, Russia ordered its troops to withdraw to the Seversky Donets River and the Oskil River. Both of those are located right about here. The Oskil River starts inside of Russia, goes down, and then feeds into the Seversky Donets River that passes through Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and was the initial barrier for the pre-2022 separatist war. Now, there were 2 major failures that Russia did that eventually led to the collapse of this line of defense. The first one was that they allowed the Ukrainians to cross at Vorchine, Kupiansk, Borova, and this area south of Liman. But the other reason, which is essentially the same thing, is that they allowed them to cross at Oskil. The Battle of Oskil was very quick because only a small bit of Russian defense was still holding the settlement. But Ukraine was able to cross the river while the bridge was still intact and establish a big force across the Seversky Donets River. It took over a decent chunk of land, which Russia initially ignored. They were currently focused more on the defense of Liman, since that crossing that Ukraine made over here allowed them to extend their line of control just south of Liman. There were other crossings across the Oskil River. They did one around Borova. They managed to cross at Kupiansk, which was a major failure that Russia allowed, and they crossed up by Vorchine. The Oskil River is very wide. It doesn't need a lot of troops to maintain in the wider sections. Russia could have held defense along the Oskil and Seversky Donets rivers. They would need troops to cover the thinner portions of the river where this red line is, and one a bit further up north where it's not as wide and crossings are more possible. However, from a defense standpoint, it's much more preferable to protect the red lines from across a river than this orange line, which is the current front line, across land. This sucked away a lot of troops that would have gone into further assaults into Bakhmut and the Donetsk area. And the main thing that allowed this to happen was the Second Battle of Liman. Crossings more north of the Oskil River drew a lot of troops away from the Liman front, which was a great decision on the Ukrainians' part. The Ukrainians initially attempted to storm Liman from the south, however they weren't able to break through the defense. They took over this big section of the front a while back, and they decided to expand it a bit more. They pushed up to Karpivka, Pisky Radkivsky, Nizhche Solone, and they just kept expanding it further out. Eventually they controlled a line that was about like this. And this was where it was kind of over for Russia. When Ukraine took over Rudkodub and pushed over into Nove, that cut one of the main supply lines going into Liman. The last one that they had was just coming through Kreminna. And Ukraine eventually pushed up to Kolodyazi too. Russia had very weak defense in the areas that weren't immediately around Liman, which is something I talk about in this video on screen right now. I'll have a link to that in the description because that's where I go over one of the main problems in the Russian military, but I'll probably talk about it in a video I'll make later this week. The Ukrainians also pushed down into Stavki and had full control over the road from Liman to Drobesheve. From there, the Russians retreated, and the Ukrainians did a river crossing south of Torske and managed to get an effective force across there. After this happened, the deal was pretty much sealed for Russia, and they had to retreat back to the Chervonopopivka River. Now, from here, Ukraine also began to work. They moved up through Terne, and then eventually just worked their way up the Chervonopopivka River, and after they had expanded their bridgehead at Kupiansk, it became easy to just smash down from two sides. And that's basically how the current front line was created. Russia had to abandon their plans for a greater offensive in the Donetsk Oblast because of this and needing more troops to defend a larger land border. And the main point I'm trying to make here is that if Russia was able to hold their defense at the Oskil River and the Seversky Donetsk River, they would still have a good position to flank Sloviansk and Kramatorsk from two sides, have a good position on the river to flank Siversk, and they could have potentially taken over a large chunk of the Donetsk Oblast and forced the war further back into the less fortified areas. However, great planning on the Ukrainian side and just really bad mistakes on the Russian side prevented this from happening. And this is why Russia is currently defending a really big line, is struggling to push through Bakhmut, hasn't taken any major cities in a really long time, and is struggling on the front all around. Alright, and that's the video we got today. I want to make a video about Bakhmut later and why Russia has failed so hard to progress in the region. And I also want to make a video summarizing the Donbass war, and I have a couple more ideas to make. I'm going on vacation on the 29th, and I don't know how I'm going to make videos, but I'll find a way to. But those are the videos to expect before Thursday. See you guys later. Thank you to my channel members Gene Helfrich, Stig Grun, Butleresque, David Appel, Delo Mathatas, Phil Martin, Robert Jenkins, Richard Quadri, Focus Pocus 100, Evan Shin, Rye Jones, Mr. Walkman, and a special thanks to my third tier members Ashley C137, Joel Reindell, Mike Q, Joe Sauer, PG, JG Bashla, and Maxim Zavershinsky.